Hey guys, me Sam Stein, managing editor at the Bulwark, back again. We have a bit of a special interview today. I'm joined by Scott Curtis. Scott was until recently chief of staff at a branch of FEMA, and he has a important story to tell. We will sort of explain it in the abstract, and then I'll let Scott get into it. But Scott was signed the deferred resignation offer that the Elon Musk Doge Trump administration gave to federal employees. Scott believed that he was going to get the deferred resignation offer because he got a acknowledgement of receipt from the Office of Personnel Management. And then, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, a couple days ago, you were fired without getting the deferred resignation offer. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's all correct. On the deferred resignation program came out by email, and I think people kind of saw the news on that.
Right.
It was a little unconventional. A lot of discussion internally on whether it was legitimate, whether it could be trusted and such. But ultimately, I decided the writing was on the wall, being a new employee, that whether I was terminated due to being probationary. I certainly, knew rifts were coming. So ultimately, I decided it was in my best interest to take. And on the 4th of February, I, did the requisite resign reply. And the next day received an acknowledgement. We've received your email. We'll be in touch shortly. Then I didn't hear anything until the 18th of February when I received a termination letter. And that had some interesting verbiage in there regarding the deferred resignation program, which I'm happy to share with you. But yeah, it was a little. I won't say I was surprised. I guess I was more disappointed that
Right.
the trust that I showed in the process and the offer. Ultimately the rug was yanked out from under me.
All right. We're going to get into all this. Before we do, as always, to the viewers, do subscribe to our feed. We really appreciate it. Scott, before we get into the specifics of what happened, let's go into your biography. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I joined the Navy. I was in the Navy from 1990 up into 2022. I retired as a captain, which is, people are more familiar with the Army ranks. So, that'd be a colonel in the Army. Did a lot of different assignments. My specialty was nuclear power. The highlight of my career was being reactor officer on Harry S. Truman, which unfortunately is in the news recently. But great experience. Wouldn't want to do it again, but very proud of that. I had command of a couple of different ships: USS Ashland, USS Dexterous, stationed out of Bahrain. I was fortunate enough to be the commanding officer of the Iowa State Naval ROTC, which was a fantastic experience. Kind of molding the future officers for the Navy and Marine Corps. And I finished out my career. Finished up officially in October 2022 at U.S. Central Command down in Tampa, Florida. And that was a nice experience, just seeing that side of things. And then I went into the private sector briefly, but ultimately, me and my wife decided we wanted to move back to Kansas City. I did some consulting work for Department of Energy Labs and the Canadian equivalents, the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. Really loved that work, but it was contract based, and the contract ended up slowing down. And then I saw the opportunity to be applied to chief of staff at FEMA Region 7 here in Kansas City. And fortunately, I was accepted for that. And I started in July, the very end of July 2024. So really, I was only in the position for 6 months, maybe 6.5 months before I was ultimately terminated. And I'm sure we'll discuss this more.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about before we get to FEMA for a second. There was one other biographical detail that you were kind of famous for, actually, which was you were the foreman for the jury in a war crimes court, and this was involving the Majid Khan, the Al Qaeda recruit, who was the courier, and correct me if I'm wrong, who was delivered $50,000, I believe, that financed a deadly bombing in Indonesia. And you wrote a how would you even call it? Was it a manifesto? Well, how would you describe what you did?
Officially, it was a recommendation for clemency.
Okay.
So the way that went down is I was the foreman for the trial of Majid Khan. As a jury, I think there were 10 of us, including myself. Um, and it was the first of the Guantanamo Bay detainee trials.
Right.
And Majid Khan had been down there. I'm not sure how long, but it had been 15 years maybe. It's quite a long time. Um, and he gave this very impassioned description, from the beginning all the way through everything he experienced. And it was, it was there was a lot of zero dark 30 type
Right.
events in there.
He was
Uh,
tortured.
yeah, and it was it was difficult to listen to. And frankly, I found him compelling. I found him believable. And for whatever reason, I don't understand the legal decision on this, but the prosecution for the United States elected to not refute anything he said. So just taking it from a kind of an idealistic standpoint, I guess you would say, then everything he said is not being refuted, so we'll take it at face value.
Right.
Um, and then we went back and decided on the recommended sentencing and
Right.
such, because this was ultimately a determination of how long he was going to be imprisoned.
Right. It was not clemency in that he got no sentence. He got a 26-year sentence. It was
Yeah, and
clemency in that the shorter end of the sentence, and you found that his torturing was basically depraved.
yeah, the letter I wrote is it's available in public, but
Yeah.
I said we were told by the judge that if we chose to, we could write a letter of clemency, which is
Right.
basically a recommendation that the events that happened to this individual would be taken into account for the sentencing. So I sat down, I wrote that letter. I read it to the rest of the jury members, and I think with one exception, they all agreed to sign it.
Right.
And the one exception, he told me, "Hey, I agree with everything you said. I just don't want to put my name on it," which I respect. There's no.
I'm bringing this up not to because this is not actually obviously directly relevant to what we're dealing with now, but just to present the point that you have been in difficult situations, you've served the country, you have been asked to make difficult decisions on behalf of our governing bodies before, and so you find yourself in this decades-long career in service, and then you decide to go back into FEMA. And tell me a little bit about why you chose to go back at this point in your career. I know you talked a little bit about it. You like the idea of service, but why FEMA specifically?
It sounds cliched, but this is the truth. Is I did the consulting work, and like I said, I enjoyed that. But what I found that I missed more than I would have expected was kind of the helping people.
Right.
And in the military, obviously we do a lot of damage sometimes, but really we help a lot of people overseas and disaster relief and such. And so this seemed like an opportunity to get back in that game, and bring the skills that I had developed over 3 decades into a chief of staff position, which I was familiar with. So that was in essence why I did it.
And what kind of responsibilities came with the job?
It was a new position. So, I spent the first, frankly, the entire time I was there trying to, figure out what I would take, what previous people had been taking. And it was a difficult transition for everybody involved. And I don't think we ever really got there. Ideally, it would have been the classic chief of staff where you kind of look 80% internal, keep the trains running on time, make sure all the the documentation is appropriate. Those kind of responsibilities. Never really got there, but I think we were heading in the right direction.
How big was your office?
Well, the office of the regional administrator where I worked, probably about 20 people. We had the data analytics group in there. We had some people who worked on external affairs and working with the tribe, the local tribes, and then obviously the leadership. FEMA as a whole was probably around 300 people. It's hard to put a number on it because we have a lot of reservists. We have a lot of different categories that come on, in response to specific disasters. So it fluctuates a lot. But the core was probably around 250 to 300 people.
Gotcha. All right, so let's fast forward. Turn of the year, Trump's inaugurated. You're at FEMA still, and you get your first fork in the road email. I believe it was in late January, maybe like the 28th of January, something like that. What was your initial reaction?
Really, we had no heads up on this. There was nothing from leadership to expect an email like this. It was just
It
the
just
only
popped in your
reason,
inbox.
yeah, it just popped
Jeez.
into your inbox. And the only reason people gave it any legitimacy at all, it was from, opm.gov.
Did you think it might have been a farce at first?
Only not I didn't only
Okay,
because of where it originated from.
right.
If it had been
OPM.
a .com or a .org,
Yeah.
yeah, I probably would have referred it to our IT people as soon as because it sounded so weird.
Right.
And it wasn't phrased in the normal government language. It sounded like something, and I think this is probably correct. It sounded like something that a couple college students slapped together and said, "Let's send this out."
It might have been that might have been the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you get the email that says fork in the road. You read it, and what do you think? Is it intriguing? Is it scary?
I,
What
I
goes through
thought it
you?
was I thought it was interesting. It came down to, and I think this is the same reaction everybody had: is it legitimate? Can I trust it? If something sounds like it's too good to be true, it probably is. That kind of mentality.
And
Um,
remind me, what were they offering exactly in the initial one? It was
It
what
was
exactly in terms of
essentially, they had ordered the back to office,
right?
which FEMA, like a lot of organizations, government agencies had, since even before COVID, it had gone to a lot of telework,
Right.
um, and that saved office space. It saved a lot of money on rent and such. So it was well established, and we knew as soon as Trump was elected that the telework was going to be done. I mean, that had
Right.
been discussed already. Um, so it basically said you would be exempt from return to office, and that if you chose this, you would be paid through the remainder of the fiscal year, 30 September. And then the language is a little unclear on whether you'd be expected to work, whether you wouldn't. It kind of
Yeah.
said at agency discretion. So me personally, I received it. I think your timeline's appropriate on the 20th of January. And I basically sat on it until more information came out. The
Right.
deadline was February 6th.
Did you
So
ask your supervisor? Did you reach out to OPM? Did you try to find more information?
we have people who work directly with the human resources at FEMA headquarters. He was one of my peers. He was a division director, and he did a good job of putting out what information he was hearing from headquarters. So I never felt the need to reach out
Right.
personally. I thought we were getting information as best we could, but even that was very murky because my feeling, which I think is on point, is that even FEMA leadership was surprised by this fork in the road email. I don't
Right.
think anybody expected it, so they were kind of chasing their tail the whole time, trying to figure out what the policy really was.
And then on February 4th, you respond, like you said, like it was instructed. You respond with one word: resign.
Yeah, resign. Period.
And that's
And
all they asked for. Just to be clear to the viewer, that's all they said is that if
yeah,
you get this and you want to take the program, all you have to do is reply with the word resign. And you did it. And then the next day, as you noted, they sent a receipt of email, an acknowledgement of receipt. Quote, we received your email response. We will reply shortly. Um, Now, after that, there were some court wranglings over whether or not this could go into effect. And the program was put on hiatus for a little bit. What were you thinking about that at that point?
well, yeah, I didn't expect that. I assumed wrongly that this had all been vetted and approved.
Yeah,
So when the first court stay went into effect, that kind of surprised me.
yeah,
The part that I felt kind of ironic for myself and for anybody else is here we had told our bosses, and I had sat down face to face with my boss and told her,
see ya.
yeah, I'm taking this deal because
Yeah,
it seems like a good offer for me. So here I am telling my boss I have no interest in working at this organization any longer. Um, and then the deal is on hold. So it kind of puts you in an awkward position. And I'm sure
right.
that's true of everybody who took the offer.
Now, when we initially talked, you said you felt like a lot of people were seriously considering it, and that your expectation was that a lot of people would eventually say yes. But it turns out that it was not the case. It was less than 5% of the federal
Yeah.
workforce that actually took the offer. Why do you think? Why do you think you took it and so few others did relative to your expectations?
Well, I was able to take it. I had discussions with a lot of people. A lot of people came to me, kind of looking for advice. And I'm hesitant to give them a recommendation either way because I think it's specific to the individual circumstances. For me, it was low risk. I'm a retired military officer. I have, my pension. Worst case, well, in the worst case did happen that it doesn't materialize. I'll be okay. I can find another job. For some people who had been at FEMA, say, for 5 years, 10 years, or even, there were some that were there for 18, 19 years and were coming up on retirement, they're taking a much bigger gamble on
Right.
if you say you want to take this and it doesn't materialize, and then I haven't heard of this happening, but, we're not done with this yet, where someone could say, well, you don't get to retire because you resigned. From a cost benefit, for me, it was a simple decision. For others, not so much. And even people who were newer probationary employees like myself, a lot of them don't, they moved across the country. They bought a house in the Kansas City area. They have young kids in school. Rolling the dice with their job was not something lightly done.
Right.
And then I think ultimately it just came down to, if you go on social media or listen to the news, there was so much conflicting information, and it came down to trust.
Right.
And I think ultimately a lot of people said, I just don't trust this offer. I did.
Yeah.
Naively.
All right. So you send in the resign letter. You get an acknowledgement of receipt. That's February 5th, and then a week and a half goes by. Are you showing up at work still, or no?
Oh yeah, and this is where we were kind of unclear because
Right.
it said if you take it, you're exempt from return to office. Just out of principle, being in a leadership position, I came in every day. I didn't telework that much,
Right.
once a week, usually at most. But the fact that you didn't get any guidance, all we received was we have received your response. We will be in
Right.
touch shortly. We were all kind of left with, well, what do we do now? And there was very little information coming from, headquarters or OPM or anything
What
else.
was there any information coming from headquarters
It
OPM?
was all just back channel, unofficial. Hey, there was a meeting on this, and this is what was discussed. Stuff that you can't really base decisions on.
Right.
But at least we knew that leadership was discussing it.
Right.
Which was some level of assurance. But there wasn't anything official by any means coming out.
And as this is happening, it's becoming very evident, either through press reports or actually it happening in real life, that the administration is then going to go after probationary employees. And I just want to be stressed: the word probation and probationary has this sort of negative connotation. This is just people who've been on government payroll for what, like a year, 18 months, something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the position. For my
Right.
position, I was on probation for a year, 12 months.
Okay.
There are some positions where it's 2 years, but the most are 1 year. So yeah, probation doesn't have any negative connotations.
It just means you're new. But you're seeing this happen, and you're a probationary employee, and so you must have these kind of dual threads going on in your head. One is, oh my God, I have the possibility that I'm going to be axed, and where the hell is more information on this deferred resignation program I signed up for?
Yeah, and again, there was nothing official, but I watch the news. Obviously, I'm a fan of the Bulwark, so I get a lot of information where I can. And on Thursday or Friday, that would have been about the 14th or 15th of February. I started seeing a lot of chatter on Reddit, primarily saying, "Hey, I just got a letter saying I was terminated as a probationary employee."
Right.
I hadn't heard anything yet, but in my experience, FEMA was just, the bureaucracy was slower because they had to wait for Department of Homeland Security to, put out information. Then FEMA would respond because FEMA is the subordinate agency to DHS.
Right.
And so I kind of, knew the writing was on the wall. And then on Monday, sitting at my desk right where I am right now, and my cell phone rings.
Tell me about Monday. So what happens? Walk us through what happened on
Well,
Monday.
Monday was a holiday. It was President's Day.
Right.
So, I'm just hanging out and enjoying the federal holiday, but, definitely paying attention to what's going on because,
Right.
there's all these, anecdotes all over the internet. Um, and so the phone rings, and it was the acting deputy regional administrator, one of my, peers. And as soon as I picked it up, I knew what it was about, and he was, very apologetic. Hey, I got some bad news. And I was just like, hey, totally understand. I knew this was coming. I'm not going to, guilt anybody. You're just the messenger. I mean, I'm not going to take it out on anybody.
Right.
So I was just like, okay, what do I do? And I was told, well, you'll be receiving a termination package this afternoon with instructions on what to do. I did, try and go into the office. I live about 15 minutes away from the office. And I was like, let me just go in there and get my personal stuff, just so I don't have to have them mail it to me and stuff. But by the time I got there, I'd already been locked out. So the security guard said, yeah, we know something's going on. We can't let you in. That was a little humiliating, but again, he was just a messenger. But I go from chief of staff of the place to we can't let you in to get your coffee mug within a couple of days. So that was interesting.
I'm sorry about that. That
Yeah,
that really
yeah.
sucks. Have you gotten your personal stuff back?
Supposedly it's in the mail. We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
How does the termination package compare to the deferred resignation package at face value?
Well, we never received a deferred resignation package.
Well,
They
the offer that they were talking about in the abstract.
well, 180 out. And the termination package. It was an email with several attachments. And the email, and I've got the text right here. It says, if you elected to participate in the deferred resignation program, a determination was made that probationary employees are not eligible and will be terminated. That email was the first I had ever seen, heard anything about probationary employees not being
Okay,
eligible.
so they subsequently have said to you the reason you will not get deferred resignation is because you are a probationary employee.
Yeah, that's an email from this email's from FEMA headquarters, employee relations. So
And that was not clear in the slightest in the fork in the road emails that you received in late January, early February.
yeah, I wouldn't even say it was ambiguous. It wasn't even a gray area. It said that everybody is eligible for this. There was no restrictions put on it.
I mean, how do you feel about all this? Obviously, it's as you said, there's a level of humiliation to having to walk to your place of work and not be allowed back in when you're the chief of staff. But it also feels like you were kind of kicked to the curb a little bit.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the first time in my entire life I've been fired. Um, Now, I'm not taking it personally because I know it wasn't oh Scott Curtis, we're firing you. It was a form letter. Hardly anything was tailored. It had my name on it. That's it. Um, and to me, the tragedy is this is happening to a lot of good people that took their first job in the federal government, were doing good work. The stereotype of the government worker totally not applicable to these individuals. Really smart, right out of college. Young families, and they're going through the same circumstance. And I think that's where the tragedy lies. And that's where I reached out to a bunch of the people I worked with that were in those positions and said, asked, hey, did you also get terminated? In a lot of cases, I was met with silence, which I assume means they were. In some cases, it was not yet.
Right.
But I mean, this is by no means over. I mean, it's there's the second phase, whatever that's going to look like, is coming. Those are the people I feel bad for. For me personally, it's not what I wanted, and it's a setback, but it's not life changing. For a lot of these people, it's life changing,
Right.
and those are the ones I feel bad for.
I mean, ultimately, in the end, there's nothing you could have done differently. You would have ended up in the same spot, right? Whether or not you took the deferred resignation offer, they were going to fire probationary employees. You were one of them, but
Oh
they
yeah.
did give you the sense that you would have been taken care of in a more humane way, and then they pulled that rug from under you.
Yeah, I was going to leave FEMA, not by my own choice, no matter what.
Right,
And that's why I personally took the deferred resignation. Well, the writing's on the wall. It's either now or in 2 months when they riff everybody or whatever.
right.
There was no path that I saw that I had a future with FEMA based on everything I was seeing. So I just decided to try and leave on the best terms that were appropriate to my situation.
What the last question I suppose here is what do you take of this of how they've handled the reduction of government and how they've treated personnel?
I'm not gonna argue that there's not inefficiencies in government. I'll fully admit that. I've worked in the federal government and the military for 3 decades. You know, as a government civilian for 7 months. There's definitely opportunities for improvement. The part that I think bothers me was kind of it was almost like misinformation, the callousness that this was rolled out. They had 4 years to think about how to do this. And it really looks like they did it the night before the first email, on the back of a napkin, and decided this is how we're going to do it. It would have been much more, even if I ended up in the same position, if they had said, hey, on February 1st, we're going to, start terminating probationary employees. On March 1st, we're going to do this, some kind of phased plan so you can understand. I would accept that. I think most people would accept that, as just the reality. A new administration was elected. This is the way they want to handle it. Okay. But, the way it was done where, here's an offer, and then here's some clarifying guidance that contradicts the initial guidance, and then if in my case I responded to it and I was told, okay, you're on board, we'll be back with you, and then ultimately you're terminated, and by the way, that deal we offered you, we decided we're not going to give it to you. That was the part that was, again, not real surprising, but I was just kind of disappointed. You spend as much time in the military as I did, and I think you get this from almost any senior military officer, is taking care of your people is just fundamental to what you do.
Right.
And this seemed to be the opposite of that. It was just hey, we're going to just lock you out of the building when you come in to get your coffee mug, and just kick you to the curb. That was the part that was disappointing, and I think there's going to be some long-term impacts to that, where I don't know who in their right mind would apply for a federal job right now, and the federal government does real work. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I think the nation is going to find that isn't happening, and they're wondering, why isn't this happening? Why isn't
Yeah.
this working anymore? And it turns out, well, those people that you didn't even know existed made this happen.
Yeah,
And
that's
we fired them all.
especially true with FEMA. It's like, boy, just wait for
Yeah.
the first disaster. Scott, what's next for you?
Don't know. I'm kind of, I've only had a couple days to really think about this, and my passion's always been, engineering, nuclear engineering. There's a lot of opportunities in small modular reactors. I'm looking into that. I've got some friends who work at Meta, and they're in the AI business. I might look into that. It's I'm 55 years old, so I feel like I'm too young to not do anything. But it also, I don't really want to start over with something I have no experience in either. Um, so I'm kind of looking out for opportunities. A small part of me wants to kind of look at running for some federal government position, but
Oh,
I think that would tear my soul out. So I'll probably
yeah, it's a little
on that one.
it's a dirty business, but
Yeah.
I have been curious how many people affected by the past month will be compelled to actually go into public service themselves. So if you do that, keep us posted. And listen, sincerely, I feel terrible about what's happened to you. It's not right how they handled it. And I appreciate from the bottom of my heart your willingness to speak out. I know you're doing this because, in part, you believe that other people are probably going through something similar, who don't have either the voice, the platform, or frankly, the stomach to do this. And this by means speaking out publicly about it. So I appreciate that, and I know others will as well. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've said it perfectly. I mean, I'm not here to talk about me. I am doing that, but it's the same message that applies to tens of thousands of federal workers that are in similar circumstances, and they didn't deserve this.
Yeah. All right. Well, Scott, first of all, if you're one of those fellow workers, hit me up. I would love to hear your story. And Scott Curtis, thank you so much for sharing your story. And to the viewers who have watched this, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, do please subscribe to our YouTube feed where you can get great conversations like this, important conversations. Scott, take care, man.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Hey, YouTube fam. If you want to support the Bulwark, the best way to do it is by becoming a YouTube Bulwark Plus member. The Bulwark is truly independent. We have no corporate overlords. We're not settling any dumb lawsuits with Trump. By joining, you help support our work, and you can get a bunch of perks right here on this platform. Ad-free content, bonus videos, live streams, and some emojis of me, which I guess some people want. So come join, come hang out, become a Bulwark YouTube Plus member, and I'll be seeing you in the comments. So behave.